The first time I noticed something was off, it was subtle. A forgotten browser tab left open on Mark's computer, displaying an unfamiliar bank logo. Not our usual one, the one we'd used for years, the one where our joint accounts held our shared dreams. This was different. Sleek, minimalist, with a foreign-sounding name that tickled the back of my mind. I dismissed it, of course. A work thing, maybe. He was an investment banker after all, always dabbling in obscure financial instruments. But the seed was planted. And once planted, it began to sprout. It was a Tuesday when the second sign appeared. I was looking for a misplaced recipe in his home office, a room usually off-limits to my organizational zeal. Tucked beneath a stack of financial journals, I found a slim, unassuming envelope. No return address. Inside, a single crisp bank statement. Not for our joint account. Not for any account I knew. This one bore his name, and a staggering sum of money I couldn't reconcile with our shared income. The address on the statement was in Zurich, Switzerland. My heart began to pound a rhythm against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of suspicion. Zurich, the unfamiliar bank logo. A cold knot of dread began to tighten in my stomach. I carefully replaced the statement, my hands trembling slightly. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed more. I needed to know the full extent of it. Over the next few weeks, I became a phantom in our own home. My mornings were spent poring over online articles about offshore banking, shell corporations, and the dark underbelly of international finance. My evenings were a careful dance of observation. I truly watched him for the first time in years. His phone calls, the late-night emails, the subtle shifts in his demeanor. He seemed lighter somehow, less stressed. Was this why? Was this secret fortune the source of his newfound serenity? The more I uncovered, the more the pieces clicked into place, forming a picture of deception that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't just an account. It was a network. A web of transfers, investments, and beneficiaries that led back to a series of phantom companies, all ultimately controlled by him. The money wasn't just a little extra. It was substantial. Enough to buy a small island. Enough to rewrite our future. A future he had seemingly decided to design without me. The betrayal was a physical ache, a constant pressure behind my eyes. The man I had loved, trusted, built a life with, had been leading a parallel existence, a secret financial life that excluded me entirely. He had stolen not just money, but our shared narrative, our foundation of trust. And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that I couldn't let him get away with it. Not $1. The revelation of Mark's hidden fortune ignited a cold, quiet fury within me. It wasn't a screaming rage, but a steely resolve that settled deep in my bones. I wouldn't confront him with flimsy accusations. I needed irrefutable proof, a solid legal foundation to dismantle his carefully constructed deception. My background in forensic accounting, a career I had largely put on hold to raise our family, suddenly felt less like a dusty relic and more like a potent weapon. The skills I had honed years ago, the meticulous attention to detail, the ability to trace financial flows through a labyrinth of transactions. They were all coming back to me, sharp and clear. My days transformed. While Mark went to his office, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath his roof, I retreated to my own secret headquarters. The guest bedroom, now my makeshift war room. My laptop became my command center, the glow of the screen reflecting in my determined eyes as I delved deeper into the intricacies of international finance. I started small, meticulously documenting every piece of evidence I had stumbled upon. The bank statement, the browser history, even the coded language I now recognized in some of his innocuous-seeming emails. I created spreadsheets, cross-referencing dates, amounts, and entities. It was tedious, painstaking work, but with each connection I made, my resolve hardened. The key, I realized, was to act swiftly and silently. If Mark suspected I was onto him, he would likely move the money, burying it deeper within his offshore network, making it virtually impossible to retrieve. My plan had to be executed with surgical precision. My first step was to consult with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but one specializing in international asset recovery and marital law. Someone discreet and utterly trustworthy. Finding the right person took time and careful research. I couldn't risk a leak. Eventually, through a trusted former colleague, I found Eleanor Vance, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for handling complex and sensitive cases. Our initial meeting was conducted with the utmost secrecy. I presented Eleanor with the fragments of my findings, the pieces of the puzzle I had painstakingly assembled. She listened intently, her expression unreadable as I laid out my suspicions and the evidence I had gathered. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair, her gaze steady. "Mrs. Aldridge," she said, her voice calm and measured, "what you're suggesting is a significant undertaking. Proving the existence of these hidden assets, and then legally accessing them will require meticulous planning and execution. But based on what you've shown me, it's certainly not impossible." A sliver of hope pierced through the anxiety that had been my constant companion. Eleanor outlined the legal strategy, the steps we would need to take to freeze the assets without alerting Mark. It would involve filing legal documents under seal, presenting a compelling case to the courts based on the evidence I had gathered, and working with international legal partners to ensure the freezing orders were enforced in Switzerland. The process was daunting, a complex legal chess game played on an international stage. But with Eleanor's expertise and my own determination, I felt a flicker of confidence. We began the meticulous work of preparing the legal filings, gathering further documentation, and building an airtight case. Every email I sent, every phone call I made, was done with the utmost caution, always aware of the possibility that Mark might be monitoring my communications. I learned to live a double life. To Mark, I was still the same unsuspecting wife, busy with household matters and social engagements. I smiled at his jokes, listened to his work stories, and played the part of blissful ignorance. But behind the facade, I was a woman on a mission, quietly and methodically dismantling his deception, one frozen dollar at a time. The weight of the secret was heavy, but the thought of reclaiming what was rightfully mine, of holding him accountable for his betrayal, kept me going. The day of the freeze felt like a scene from a meticulously planned heist, except I was stealing back what was already mine. Eleanor, my lawyer, had prepared everything with surgical precision. The legal filings were under seal, ensuring Mark remained blissfully unaware until it was too late. Our chosen date was a Friday, just before a long holiday weekend, giving us maximum time for the orders to propagate through the international banking system before he could react. I remember that morning vividly. Mark left for work, whistling a tune, completely oblivious. I watched him go, a strange mix of sorrow and grim satisfaction churning inside me. This wasn't about vengeance, not entirely. It was about justice, about reclaiming my sense of self and the life he had tried to steal. My phone rang precisely at 9 a.m. It was Eleanor. "It's go time, Elara," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "The courts have issued the worldwide freezing orders. Our Swiss counterparts are initiating the process now. We expect the assets to be fully locked down within the hour." A shiver ran down my spine, a strange blend of exhilaration and terror. This was it. The culmination of weeks of clandestine work, late nights, and agonizing secrecy. I sat at my kitchen table, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee, my eyes glued to the clock. Every minute felt like an hour. The silence in the house was deafening, punctuated only by the rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. My mind raced, picturing the complex electronic wires, the secure servers, the legal documents flying across continents, all converging on those hidden accounts in Zurich. It was an invisible battle, fought not with fists but with legal codes and digital commands. Around 9:45 a.m., Eleanor called again. Her voice held a note of triumph this time. "It's done," she announced. "Every last dollar. The Swiss banks have confirmed the assets are frozen. He won't be able to move a cent." A wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. It was done. The quiet hammer blow had landed. The money, his secret, ill-gotten fortune, was now beyond his reach. The financial umbilical cord to his deception had been severed. I closed my eyes, taking a deep, shaky breath. The immediate surge of adrenaline began to recede, leaving behind a strange hollowness. The relief was immense, but it was tinged with the sadness of what this all meant for my marriage, for the life I thought I had. Now came the hard part, the confrontation, the unveiling of my knowledge. He would come home expecting normalcy, and instead find his world, the one he had so carefully built on lies, irrevocably shattered. I knew the storm was coming, but I was ready. I had taken back the first piece of my life. The evening air hung heavy with an unspoken tension, a stark contrast to the deceptive calm within our home. I had prepared dinner, a simple meal, as if it were any other Friday night. The aroma of roasted chicken and herbs filled the kitchen, a domestic facade for the impending storm. When Mark walked through the door, he was still the same man, a confident stride, a brief smile, the usual question about my day. He settled into his armchair, loosening his tie, scrolling through his phone. The normalcy was almost unbearable. I waited until after dinner, until we were sitting across from each other at the dining table, the last of the candles flickering between us. The moment felt charged, a quiet before the detonation. My heart hammered, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, but my voice when it came was steady. "Mark," I began, my tone calm, almost detached. "We need to talk. About Zurich." His head snapped up, the color draining from his face. The casual ease instantly evaporated, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then alarm. His eyes darted to mine, searching, before his gaze fell to the table, betraying the sudden tremor in his hands. "Zurich," he repeated, his voice a little too high, a little too strained. He tried to recover, to feign ignorance. "What about Zurich, Ilara? Are you planning a trip?" I allowed a faint, knowing smile to play on my lips. "No, Mark. Not a trip. I'm talking about the money, the accounts, the millions you've been stashing away, quietly, secretly, for years." His eyes widened, and for a fleeting second, I saw raw panic. Then, like a switch, a defensive anger flared. "What are you talking about? That's insane, Ilara. Where would you even get such an idea?" "I got the idea," I said, my voice rising slightly, the years of suppressed doubts and anxieties finally breaking through. "From the browser tabs you left open, the statements you thought were so carefully hidden, the coded emails, the phantom companies. I got the idea from weeks of sleepless nights, tracing every single transfer, every single lie." I pushed a thin, neatly organized folder across the table. Inside were copies of the damning documents. Bank statements, transfer records, corporate registration papers, all meticulously annotated. He stared at it, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. "I found it, Mark. Every last dollar. And as of this morning, it's all frozen." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. His eyes shot up, meeting mine, and I saw the full force of his shock. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a man who had just been hit by an invisible force, staggering under a blow he never saw coming. His carefully constructed world, his secret empire, had crumbled around him. "Frozen," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "What? What do you mean, frozen?" "It means," I said, leaning forward, my voice firm, "that you can't touch it. Not a cent. It's locked down, Mark. Legally. And you'll have to explain to a judge exactly how you managed to accumulate that kind of wealth outside our joint assets, and why you felt the need to hide it from your wife." He stared at the folder, then at me. His face a mixture of betrayal and utter defeat. The fight had gone out of him, replaced by a chilling resignation. He had lived a lie, and now that lie was exposed, shattered into a million pieces. The silence that followed was deafening, a hollow testament to the end of a life we had once shared, a life now irrevocably broken by his secret. The silence that fell after my revelation was not one of peace, but of a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. Mark sat frozen, the dinner napkin still clutched in his hand, his eyes fixed on the folder like it was a venomous snake. The candlelight flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to mock the rigid stillness of his form. I watched him, a part of me almost pitying the complete unraveling on his face, another part steeling itself against any attempt at manipulation. This was the man I had shared a bed with for 15 years, the father of our children. And yet, in this moment, he was a stranger, stripped bare of his carefully constructed facade. Finally, a low, guttural sound escaped his throat. You went through my things." The question was less an accusation and more a desperate grasp at a familiar line of defense. "I found your secret, Mark," I corrected, my voice unwavering. "There's a difference. You chose to hide millions from me, from our family. I simply uncovered the truth you so carefully buried." The following days were a blur of hushed phone calls and simmering tension. Mark, stripped of his usual composure, became a man possessed by panic. The initial shock wore off, replaced by a frantic scramble to regain control of what he had lost. He paced the house incessantly, barking orders into his phone. His voice a low, urgent murmur that often escalated into frustrated shouts. I could hear snippets from my office in the guest room. "Lawyers, banks, unfreeze it," he'd demand, his voice cracking with desperation. "This is an outrage. My firm will sue." His firm, I knew, would be less than thrilled about this development. Investment banking thrived on discretion and trust. A senior partner caught with millions in undeclared offshore accounts was a scandal waiting to explode, threatening not just his career but potentially the firm's reputation. This was precisely why I had moved so decisively. He tried to approach me, sometimes with feigned calm, sometimes with barely suppressed rage. "Ilara, this is insane. We need to settle this. Think about the kids. Do you want to drag them through a messy divorce? Think about what this will do to us." The "us" sounded hollow, a word stripped of all meaning. "There is no us anymore, Mark," I'd reply, keeping my voice even, my gaze firm. "Not when you built a secret life behind my back. The only thing we need to discuss now is the terms of the divorce and the equitable division of all assets, including the ones you tried to hide." His desperation grew. He started making thinly veiled threats, reminding me of his powerful connections, his legal team, implying I was out of my depth. He even tried emotional manipulation, bringing up shared memories, our early days, painting a picture of a love he had clearly abandoned years ago. Each attempt was met with the same unwavering resolve. Eleanor had prepared me for this. She called it the stages of financial grief: denial, anger, bargaining. One afternoon, I heard him on a particularly heated call. "They can't do this. Get an injunction. Argue marital property rights. Find a loophole, damn it." He was clearly speaking to a high-powered legal team, throwing money at the problem as he always did. But this time, money wouldn't buy him a quick fix. My legal team, led by Eleanor, was already steps ahead. I knew he was exploring every avenue to get the freeze lifted. He was likely arguing that the money was solely his, earned independently, or that it constituted premarital assets, or even that I had no right to access or freeze them. But the evidence I had collected, combined with Eleanor's expertise in international financial law, was formidable. He was cornered, and he knew it. The frantic energy radiating from him was palpable, a testament to the quiet, devastating blow I had landed. While Mark flailed in a tempest of his own making, Eleanor Vance remained the eye of the storm. Calm, precise, and utterly in control. My initial fear and desperate hope slowly transmuted into a quiet confidence as I watched her work. She was a maestro conducting a complex legal symphony, each note a calculated move against Mark's increasingly erratic counterattacks. Our meetings moved beyond the initial shock, delving into the intricate layers of legal strategy. Eleanor didn't just aim to keep the assets frozen. She aimed for a complete, undeniable victory. "The freeze was merely the first strike, Ilara," she explained during one of our video calls, her face a picture of focused determination. "Now we consolidate. We force his hand." Her team, a small elite group of specialists, began to dig deeper. They weren't just relying on the documents I'd found. They were building an ironclad case. This involved. While I had laid the groundwork, Eleanor brought in a top-tier forensic accounting firm. They meticulously went through every financial record, every obscure offshore company Mark was associated with, tracing the flow of money with an even more granular level of detail. They unearthed connections I hadn't even suspected, linking his hidden accounts to other, even less savory financial instruments. Eleanor was constantly liaising with her counterparts in Zurich, but also in other financial hubs where Mark might have touched funds. The Cayman Islands, Panama, even Singapore. She built a network of legal strongholds, anticipating Mark's every potential move to shift or hide assets further. This was the critical next step. The divorce petition wasn't just about ending the marriage. It was the legal framework for claiming the hidden assets. Eleanor drafted it with an emphasis on fraudulent concealment of marital assets, making it clear to the court that Mark's actions were not merely a personal dispute but a deliberate attempt to deprive me of my rightful share. She began preparing for the extensive discovery phase, the legal process where both sides exchange information. Eleanor knew Mark would try to hide more, obfuscate, and delay. She armed me with lists of questions, types of documents to demand, and strategies to ensure full disclosure. "We'll depose every single person connected to those accounts if we have to," she stated, her voice leaving no room for doubt. Eleanor also became my strategic and emotional anchor. She didn't just talk law. She talked through the psychological warfare Mark was trying to wage. "He'll try to wear you down, Ilara. He'll try to make you doubt yourself. But remember why you're doing this. This isn't just about money. It's about justice. It's about reclaiming your autonomy." Her words resonated deeply. With Eleanor's guidance, I felt less like a victim and more like a warrior. The complex legal language, the dizzying international laws. She translated it all into actionable steps, transforming my raw anger into focused determination. The battle had just begun, and with Eleanor leading the charge, I knew I was in formidable hands. The quiet hum of our once harmonious home began to crack, the strain of our silent war seeping into every corner. We had 2 children, a son, Alex, 16, and a daughter, Chloe, 14. They were perceptive, acutely attuned to the unspoken currents flowing between their parents. Initially, they picked up on the chill between Mark and me. The missing easy laughter, the separate meal times, the almost perfunctory good mornings. They'd exchange worried glances, their young faces etched with concern. Alex, ever the protector, would try to bridge the gap with forced jokes or questions about our day. Chloe, more sensitive, retreated into her books and art, her vibrant energy dimming. "Mom, is everything okay?" Chloe asked me one evening, her voice barely a whisper as I walked past her bedroom door. She was huddled on her bed, a sketchbook open but untouched beside her. I paused, my hand on the doorframe. "How much do you tell them? How do you explain that their father, the man they adored, was a stranger to their mother, tangled in a web of financial deceit?" "Everything will be okay, sweetheart," I managed, my voice softer than I intended. "Just some grown-up stuff. We're working through it." It felt like a betrayal to both them and myself to lie, but the truth was too heavy a burden for their young shoulders, at least for now. Mark surprisingly became distant from them too. His usual boisterous presence at the dinner table was replaced by strained silence. His phone often clutched in his hand, his eyes scanning it even as the kids spoke to him. He was consumed by his own predicament, the desperate attempts to salvage his hidden fortune overshadowing everything else. He missed Alex's soccer game, a cardinal sin for a father who never missed a match. He forgot Chloe's dentist appointment. These small failures, unlike the grand financial deception, were visible, tangible wounds to their routine, their sense of security. The strain escalated when Mark's legal team sent their first official communication, a heavily worded letter denying all claims and threatening counter-litigation. While Eleanor dismissed it as standard posturing, it served as a stark reminder that this wasn't going to be a quiet divorce. This would be a public, messy fight. Whispers started in our social circles. Friends noticed Mark's increasingly erratic behavior, his sudden evasiveness. Invitations to joint gatherings dwindled. Our meticulously curated image of a successful, happy family began to fray at the edges. I saw the questions in people's eyes, the knowing glances. It was one thing to go through a divorce. It was another to have it shrouded in an air of scandal. I tried to shield the children from the brunt of it, but the echoes of our conflict reverberated through the house, through their lives. The fear was that soon, the whispers would turn into shouts, and the carefully constructed wall around our family would collapse, exposing them to the full, harsh light of their father's deception. The emotional toll on them was perhaps the most painful consequence of Mark's actions, a cost that no amount of recovered money could ever truly repay. As Eleanor's forensic team burrowed deeper into Mark's financial labyrinth, what they began to unearth went beyond mere hidden marital assets. The initial shock of the Zurich accounts had been profound, but what followed was a chilling revelation of a much darker, more intricate web of deceit. "Ilara," Eleanor said during a late-night video call, her voice unusually grave, "we've found something disturbing. It's not just about hiding money from you. It appears Mark might have been involved in, shall we say, less than legitimate dealings." My stomach clenched. "What do you mean, less than legitimate?" "We're seeing patterns," she explained, pulling up a complex diagram on our shared screen. It showed arrows connecting shell corporations not just to Mark's personal accounts, but to other, even more opaque entities. Large sums moving through these offshore companies, with no clear business purpose. Discrepancies in declared income versus actual cash flow. And some of the names associated with these transfers. They've raised red flags with our intelligence firm. The intelligence firm Eleanor employed specialized in tracking illicit financial activities. Their findings pointed to connections with individuals and organizations known for their shadowy dealings. Not outright criminal, perhaps, but certainly operating in the gray areas of international finance, on the very edge of legality. There were signs of potential money laundering, and even hints of involvement with schemes that skirted international sanctions. This wasn't just about my divorce anymore. It was about the ethical and legal integrity of the man I had married. The hidden millions were a symptom, not the disease. The disease was a profound moral rot, a willingness to engage in highly questionable practices for personal gain. "Are you saying he could be facing criminal charges?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The thought was terrifying. Not for Mark, but for the devastating impact it would have on our children, on their perception of their father. "It's too early to say for certain," Eleanor cautioned. "But the paper trail is concerning. We're carefully piecing it together. Our priority remains securing your assets in the divorce, but these new findings give us significant leverage. They suggest a pattern of behavior that could indicate a larger pattern of financial misconduct." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a husband betraying his wife. This was a man who might have been risking his entire family's future, and possibly even their safety, by dabbling in the murky depths of high-stakes, illicit finance. The knowledge felt like a poison, spreading through my veins, tainting every memory, every shared moment. The shock of discovery was replaced by a deep-seated revulsion. This was no longer just a personal vendetta. It was a matter of principle. I had to expose the full truth not just for myself, but to ensure that justice, in every sense of the word, was served. The discovery of Mark's deeper, potentially illicit dealings ignited a desperate fury in him. He knew I had unearthed something far more damaging than hidden assets. His initial pleas and threats morphed into a full-scale, scorched-earth counterattack, a direct assault designed to discredit me and protect his crumbling empire. His legal team, now bolstered by an army of high-priced litigators, adopted an aggressive strategy. Their first move was a motion to unfreeze the assets, arguing that my actions were an unlawful and baseless attempt to seize legitimate business funds. They painted me as an emotionally unstable spouse, driven by jealousy and a desire for unjust enrichment. The accusations came thick and fast. They claimed I had violated his privacy, illegally accessed his accounts, and even fabricated evidence. They implied I was attempting to ruin his career out of spite. It was a classic character assassination, a tactic designed to shift blame and muddy the waters in the eyes of the court. Mark himself began spreading rumors within our social circle, leveraging his carefully cultivated image. He spun a narrative of a sudden, irrational breakdown on my part, portraying himself as the bewildered victim of a vindictive wife. Some friends, those more loyal to him or perhaps swayed by his charm, began to distance themselves. The isolation was palpable, a chilling side effect of his malicious campaign. He attempted to leverage the children too, though indirectly. He'd make subtle comments to Alex and Chloe about how Mommy was making things difficult, or how this whole situation was unnecessary, trying to plant seeds of doubt in their minds about my motives. I had to counteract this by reiterating that I was acting to protect their future, though the full truth remained shielded from them. Eleanor, however, remained unfazed. "This is standard playbook, Ilara," she assured me, her voice calm amidst the legal storm. "When they have no defense on the facts, they attack the messenger. It's a sign we've hit a nerve." Her team meticulously prepared to dismantle every one of Mark's accusations. We had documented every step, ensuring all evidence was legally obtained. We were ready with affidavits, expert testimonies, and a clear, irrefutable timeline of his deception. His aggressive tactics only served to strengthen Eleanor's resolve to expose the full extent of his misconduct. This wasn't just a battle for money anymore. It was a battle for my integrity, my reputation, and ultimately for justice. The relentless legal skirmishes and Mark's personal attacks began to take a heavy toll. While Eleanor handled the intricate legal maneuvers, the emotional burden of the fight fell squarely on my shoulders. It was an invisible battle, fought in silence within the walls of my own home, even as the storm raged publicly around Mark. Sleep became a luxury. My mind raced through scenarios, legal documents, and Mark's escalating malice. I'd wake in the dead of night, heart pounding, convinced I'd missed a crucial detail, or that his insidious whispers were somehow reaching our children. The once familiar house now felt like a cage, every shared memory tainted by the betrayal. The isolation was profound. Some friends, uncomfortable with the escalating conflict and the rumors Mark was sowing, slowly faded from my life. Their polite evasions and awkward silences were a new kind of pain, a testament to how easily a carefully constructed life could unravel. I found solace only in the unwavering support of Eleanor and a handful of incredibly loyal friends who saw through Mark's machinations. They were my lifeline, reminding me I wasn't alone in this fight. Yet, despite the unwavering resolve, there were moments of crushing doubt. Was I doing the right thing? Was the cost, measured in sleepless nights, emotional anguish, and the looming shadow over my children, too high? There were days I simply wanted to give up, to let it all go, to disappear from the suffocating pressure. But then I'd remember the cold calculation in Mark's eyes, the audacity of his deceit, and the quiet dignity I was fighting to reclaim. This wasn't just about money. It was about holding him accountable, about setting a precedent for myself and for my children, showing them that integrity mattered. I started a new routine, a small act of rebellion against the chaos. Every morning I would go for a run, the biting cold air clearing my mind, the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement a grounding force. It was during these solitary moments that I found a fragile strength, a renewed determination to endure. This battle might be draining, but it wouldn't break me. The relentless pressure of Mark's counterattack, coupled with his increasingly desperate attempts to discredit me, led to his undoing in an unexpected way. He became careless, arrogant in his belief that his influence and money would ultimately shield him. The crucial slip came not from a hidden document or a secret meeting, but from a seemingly innocuous source, a disgruntled former associate. Eleanor's team, with their extensive network, had been quietly putting out feelers, discreetly inquiring about Mark's recent business dealings. They weren't looking for direct evidence related to my case, but rather for any pattern of behavior that might corroborate their suspicions of deeper illicit activity. One evening, Eleanor called. her voice containing a rare note of excitement. "Ilara, we might have a break. My investigator got a tip." Apparently, one of Mark's former consultants for an overseas project, a project not directly related to his official banking work, just had a major falling out with him. And this consultant, a man named Sterling, isn't known for his discretion. Sterling, it turned out, was a fixer, a middleman who specialized in navigating complex international regulations and, more often than not, circumventing them. He had been instrumental in setting up some of the more convoluted shell corporations and facilitating the dubious transfers that Eleanor's team had flagged. His grievance with Mark was personal and financial, a bitter dispute over unpaid fees for a particularly high-risk deal. Eleanor moved swiftly. Her team reached out to Sterling through an intermediary, assuring him of anonymity and offering a pathway to share information without directly implicating himself in any wrongdoing. The bait worked. Sterling, fueled by resentment and a desire for retribution, saw an opportunity to hurt Mark without fully exposing his own activities. He didn't provide direct evidence of my marital assets, but he offered something far more valuable: an insider's perspective on Mark's modus operandi. He detailed how Mark used layers of offshore companies, obscured beneficial ownership, and manipulated currency exchange rates to move vast sums of money outside the legitimate banking system. He provided coded names, specific dates of suspicious transfers, and even mentioned other individuals involved in these shadow dealings. Names that immediately pinged on the intelligence firm's radar for their connections to questionable global financial networks. This wasn't just about my divorce settlement anymore. Sterling's information provided crucial links that connected Mark's hidden millions to a much larger, more illicit scheme. It gave Eleanor undeniable leverage, not just in the divorce court, but potentially with federal authorities who had a far broader reach than any civil court. It was the crack in Mark's armor, revealing the true scale of his deception and providing a path to ensure he faced full accountability. Sterling's crucial information injected a new, potent energy into our legal strategy. The stakes had just escalated dramatically. Eleanor's office transformed into a high-octane war room, every surface covered with documents, diagrams, and legal texts. The air hummed with focused intensity. "This is no longer just a divorce case, Ilara," Eleanor stated, her eyes gleaming with a fierce determination. "This is about exposing a pattern of systemic financial misconduct. We're going for maximum impact." Our preparation for the actual court proceedings became meticulous, almost obsessive. Every detail was scrutinized. Evidence collection and categorization. Eleanor's team, with the insights from Sterling, went back through every piece of evidence, cross-referencing it with new leads. They built comprehensive timelines showing the flow of funds from legitimate sources, through Mark's shadow network, and into the hidden accounts. Every email, every bank statement, every obscure corporate filing was categorized, indexed, and prepared for presentation. They compiled a mountain of irrefutable documentation. Witness preparation. This was critical. Sterling, despite his initial reluctance to be fully exposed, was convinced to provide a sworn affidavit, detailing his knowledge of Mark's methods. Eleanor also identified other potential witnesses, minor players in Mark's orbit, who, under the weight of subpoena and the threat of legal repercussions, might corroborate our claims. I, too, underwent rigorous preparation, rehearsing my testimony, ensuring my narrative was clear, concise, and emotionally controlled. Eleanor drilled me on how to handle cross-examination, anticipating every angle Mark's lawyers might take to discredit me. Expert testimonies. Eleanor brought in more than just forensic accountants. She engaged experts in international banking regulations, anti-money laundering protocols, and even specialists in the psychology of financial crime. Their testimonies would contextualize Mark's actions, demonstrating not just that he hid money, but how he did it, and the potential illegality of his methods. Media strategy. While we wanted to win in court, Eleanor also understood the power of public opinion. She began discreetly preparing a media strategy, should the case break into the news. The goal wasn't sensationalism, but to control the narrative, to present the facts clearly and avoid Mark's attempts at character assassination. "We want the truth out there, Ilara," she emphasized. "And if his team forces our hand, we'll ensure it's presented accurately." The weeks leading up to the first significant hearing were a crucible. The tension was immense, but so was the feeling of empowerment. I wasn't just a wronged wife. I was a key player in dismantling a sophisticated scheme, armed with truth and a formidable legal team. The courtroom awaited, and I was ready to face Mark, not as his victim, but as the one who had finally pulled back the curtain on his lies. The day of the preliminary hearing dawned crisp and unforgiving. Stepping into the courthouse felt like entering an arena. The air was thick with unspoken tension, the hushed murmurs of lawyers and clerks a low thrum against the polished marble floors. I wore a simple, tailored suit, a quiet armor against the public scrutiny I knew awaited. Mark was already there, flanked by his formidable legal team. He looked impeccably dressed, a picture of polished composure, but I caught the darting glance he shot my way. A flicker of something beneath the surface that might have been fear, or perhaps just cold calculation. We avoided eye contact, the space between us charged with years of unspoken grievances and newly unearthed betrayals. Eleanor, calm and resolute, was a reassuring presence beside me. She whispered last-minute instructions, her words a steady anchor in the swirling anxiety. "Remember, Ilara, stick to the facts. Don't let him bait you." The hearing began, not with a bang, but with a torrent of legal jargon. Mark's lead attorney, a slick, aggressive litigator named Mr. Thorne, launched into his opening statement. He painted a picture of me as a desperate, vengeful wife, making wild, unsubstantiated claims, attempting to sabotage Mark's esteemed career. He argued vehemently for the immediate unfreezing of assets, claiming they were legitimate business funds being unlawfully withheld, causing irreparable harm to Mark's financial ventures. He dismissed my evidence as fabricated or misinterpreted, a product of an unstable mind. My stomach churned, but I kept my gaze fixed on the judge, projecting an air of quiet dignity. I knew this was their strategy, to discredit me, to turn the narrative upside down. Then it was Eleanor's turn. She rose with a quiet authority that commanded the room. Her voice, though calm, resonated with undeniable conviction. She didn't shout or posture. Instead, she laid out the facts systematically and logically, building a narrative of deliberate deception. She presented the initial bank statements I'd found, the intricate web of shell corporations, and the discrepancies in Mark's reported income versus the vast sums flowing through offshore accounts. "Your Honor," Eleanor stated, her voice clear and precise, "what Mr. Thorne dismisses as wild claims is, in fact, a meticulously documented pattern of fraudulent concealment of marital assets. My client, Mrs. Aldridge, uncovered a sophisticated scheme designed to siphon millions out of the marital estate and hide them in obscure international accounts." She then dropped the first real bombshell, a direct reference to the darker findings. "Furthermore, the evidence we will present suggests these hidden funds may be connected to activities that raise serious questions about the legality of Mr. Aldridge's financial dealings, extending far beyond the scope of marital dispute into areas of potential financial misconduct." A ripple went through the courtroom. Mark's face, previously composed, visibly paled. Mr. Thorne immediately objected, calling it speculative and irrelevant to the immediate motion to unfreeze assets. "On the contrary, Your Honor," Eleanor countered smoothly, "it is highly relevant to the court's decision on whether to unfreeze assets obtained through potentially illicit means. We ask for a full forensic discovery, and that the freeze remain in place to prevent further dissipation or concealment of these funds." The judge, a stern but fair woman, listened intently. She reserved her ruling on the motion to unfreeze the assets, ordering a comprehensive discovery process to begin immediately. It wasn't a final victory, but it was a crucial strategic win. The freeze would remain. The battle was far from over, but the first salvo had been fired, and Mark's carefully constructed facade had visibly cracked. The truth, in all its uncomfortable glory, was beginning to surface. The judge's decision to maintain the asset freeze and demand full discovery sent immediate shockwaves through Mark's world. What had been a contained, albeit intense, legal battle was now poised to spill into the public arena. The first hint came subtly, a whisper on the wind. It started with a small, obscure blog specializing in financial misdoings among the elite, run by an anonymous former banker. They published an article, a thinly veiled reference to a prominent investment banker, embroiled in a secret offshore asset dispute during a high-profile divorce. No names were mentioned, but the details were too specific to be coincidental. Mark, ever sensitive to his public image, became increasingly agitated. He barked at his PR team, attempting to squash the burgeoning rumors. But once the initial crack formed, the dam began to crumble. The anonymous blog post was picked up by a larger, more established financial news site, which, while still omitting names, confirmed that sources close to the ongoing legal proceedings indicated a case involving substantial undisclosed foreign assets. Then came the local newspaper. A junior reporter, smelling blood in the water, started making discreet inquiries. Our address, our family name, our carefully constructed life. It was all suddenly under an unwelcome spotlight. Photographers loitered near our street, their long lenses pointing vaguely in the direction of our house. The kids, already on edge, started asking questions, their innocent eyes reflecting the anxiety of seeing strangers outside our home. "Mom, why are those people here?" Alex asked one afternoon. His voice laced with confusion and a hint of fear as he pointed out a parked car with tinted windows. "Just reporters, honey," I said, trying to sound calm, though my stomach was tied in knots. "They're interested in the divorce. It's a high-profile case." The partial truth was a bitter pill. The real blow to Mark's reputation came when his firm, facing increasing internal pressure and the threat of public scandal, placed him on indefinite leave, pending the resolution of his personal legal matters. This was industry code for being sidelined, a public distancing. His name was quietly removed from prominent deals. His presence at industry events vanished. The carefully cultivated image of the brilliant, trustworthy banker was fracturing under the weight of the allegations. His once glowing professional reputation, his carefully curated network of contacts, everything he had built his identity upon, was now being scrutinized, questioned, and slowly dismantled. The irony was not lost on me. He had built a secret empire, believing it would secure his future, and instead it was spectacularly destroying his present. The quiet freeze of his assets was now creating a very public inferno, and he was squarely in its center. The mounting pressure, the public scrutiny, and the relentless legal assault began to chip away at Mark's carefully constructed facade. He had always prided himself on his unflappable demeanor, his ability to control every situation. But now, even that seemed to be eroding. The first clear sign of his unraveling came during a mandatory deposition. These were typically highly choreographed affairs, with lawyers coaching their clients on every answer. But Mark, under the strain, seemed to lose his grip. Eleanor and her team had meticulously prepared a series of questions designed to highlight inconsistencies in his financial disclosures, pushing him on the specific purpose of obscure transfers and the true beneficiaries of his shell companies. He grew visibly agitated, his answers becoming clipped, evasive, and increasingly contradictory. At one point, when pressed on a particularly large sum moved through a Panamanian entity, he snapped at Eleanor, his voice rising. "This is harassment. You have no right to pry into legitimate business dealings." Eleanor, calm as ever, simply responded, "Mr. Aldridge, the court has ordered full discovery. Your refusal to answer truthfully only raises further questions about the legitimacy of these dealings." His anger flared, momentarily overriding his usual calculated restraint. "It's my money. I earned it. She's just trying to extort me." He gestured wildly towards me, his face flushed. "She's a gold digger. This is all a scheme." His own lawyer tried to interject, subtly placing a hand on his arm, but Mark pushed it away. "No. I won't let her ruin me." He ranted for a few more moments, making unsubstantiated claims and lashing out, before his lawyer finally managed to call for a recess. It was a crucial misstep. His outburst, recorded by the court stenographer, painted a clear picture of his desperation and a stunning lack of self-control. It showed the court a man cornered, resorting to personal attacks rather than factual defenses. He hadn't just lost his composure. He had exposed a raw, ugly vulnerability, hinting at the genuine fear beneath his arrogant exterior. This wasn't the image of a wronged, successful businessman. It was the image of a man unhinged, with something significant to hide. The veneer had cracked, revealing the raw, desperate truth beneath. Mark's outburst at the deposition was a clear signal to his legal team that their aggressive tactics were backfiring. It was also a sign to Eleanor that he was feeling the immense pressure, making him more susceptible to negotiation. Shortly after the deposition, a discreet offer came through his lawyers: a settlement conference outside of court. Eleanor advised caution. This isn't about him suddenly seeing the light, Ilara. This is about damage control. He wants to avoid the full public exposure of his illicit dealings and potentially serious legal repercussions beyond just the divorce. We agreed to attend, but with strict parameters. The meeting was held in a neutral third-party mediator's office, a sterile, hushed environment designed for difficult conversations. Mark was there with Mr. Thorne, looking noticeably less confident than before. He avoided my gaze, focusing instead on the mediator and his own hands clasped tightly on the table. The mediator began by outlining the goal: to find a mutually acceptable resolution that would avoid a protracted and costly trial. Mr. Thorne then presented Mark's offer. It was an initial sum, significantly higher than anything he'd ever hinted at, but still a fraction of the frozen assets, and it came with strings attached. A non-disclosure agreement, NDA, that would effectively silence me about the true nature of his hidden fortune and any illicit activities. I listened impassively as Eleanor countered. She systematically dismantled their offer, laying bare its deficiencies. She emphasized the full extent of the frozen assets, the strength of our case, and the damning evidence of his deeper financial misconduct, hinting at the potential for criminal investigation if this continued. She made it clear that an NDA covering his potential illegal activities was a non-starter. My client is seeking an equitable division of all marital assets, regardless of where they were hidden, Eleanor stated firmly. And she will not be silenced on matters of financial impropriety that could have far-reaching legal consequences for Mr. Aldridge. The room grew tense. Mark visibly squirmed. He attempted to interject, to justify, to diminish, but Eleanor held the floor, presenting the undeniable facts. The negotiations became a high-stakes poker game. He upped his offer grudgingly but still clung to the NDA. We countered, always pushing for the full amount and refusing to compromise on the truth. Hours passed. The air grew thick with frustration and exhaustion. Finally, Mark, through his lawyer, made his final offer. It was a substantial sum, representing a significant portion of the frozen assets, plus alimony, and full custody for me of our children's financial future. But crucially, the NDA was limited only to the details of the divorce settlement itself, not the underlying criminal implications of his broader financial activities. It was a concession born of desperation, a tacit admission of guilt that he was willing to pay dearly to keep a lid on the deeper secrets. Eleanor looked at me. It was a fair offer, considering the risks and costs of a full trial. It wouldn't stop any potential government investigations into his illicit dealings, which was what he feared most. It allowed me to rebuild my life, secure our children's future, and regain my independence. It wasn't about vengeance, but justice and future security. I looked at Mark. His eyes, for the first time, held a flicker of something I hadn't seen before. Not anger, but a profound weariness, the weight of his unraveling finally crushing him. I gave Eleanor a small nod. The dance of negotiation was nearing its end. The settlement conference concluded not with a bang, but with the soft scratch of pens on paper. The final offer Mark's team presented, born of his desperation to contain the escalating scandal, was accepted. It wasn't everything I could have potentially squeezed out of a full-blown trial, but it was fair, substantial, and crucially, kept the absolute darkest corners of his financial dealings from being fully aired in open court, at least for now. My primary goal was the return of the hidden assets and the security of my children, not to become a public spectacle, though his actions certainly invited it. The agreement stipulated a significant payout, ensuring not just an equitable division of our official marital assets, but also a substantial portion of the frozen offshore funds. It included generous alimony for a defined period and, perhaps most importantly for me, full financial independence and control over the children's educational and future expenses. The NDA was carefully crafted by Eleanor. It restricted me from discussing the details of the divorce settlement itself, but it explicitly did not prevent me from cooperating with any future investigations into Mark's broader, potentially illicit financial activities. This was a crucial victory. It meant I wouldn't be complicit in his continued deceit, nor would I be silenced if justice on a larger scale came calling. Mark signed the papers with a grim, almost defeated expression. His hand trembled slightly as he scrawled his signature. The man who had once exuded unshakable confidence, now a shadow of his former self. His legal team looked relieved, having narrowly averted a public relations catastrophe that could have ended his career entirely and possibly landed him in far deeper trouble. I signed with a quiet sense of triumph, not of vengeance, but of reclamation. Each stroke of the pen felt like severing a tie, a step towards a future free from his lies and manipulation. The money was just a symbol. What I was truly reclaiming was my autonomy, my dignity, and the integrity of my own life. The divorce was finalized shortly thereafter, a quiet administrative process compared to the preceding tempest. There was no dramatic courtroom showdown, no public pronouncements beyond the terse legal filings. But the effect was profound. Mark's professional life was severely damaged. He never returned to his old firm, his name now synonymous with scandal in the upper echelons of finance. The social circles we once inhabited quietly closed their doors to him. As for me, the battle was over. The hidden millions were ours, legally and irrevocably. The truth, in a way that mattered, had come out. The quiet freeze, executed with precision and daring, had brought down an empire of lies, and given me the power to rebuild. The immediate aftermath of the settlement was a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The constant adrenaline that had fueled me for months began to recede, leaving behind a profound weariness, but also a liberating sense of lightness. The quiet hum of the house, once filled with unspoken tension, was slowly replaced by a genuine calm. Rebuilding wasn't just about financial security. It was about reclaiming spaces, routines, and ultimately, a sense of self. The guest bedroom, my former war room, was redecorated, stripped of its legal clutter and transformed into a vibrant, sunlit space for contemplation and growth. I spent more time with Alex and Chloe, openly discussing the divorce in an age-appropriate way, emphasizing that sometimes adults make difficult choices, and that my actions were about ensuring their future stability. They were still processing, but the palpable relief that the tension between their parents was gone was evident in their brighter smiles and renewed energy. With the financial resources secured, I had options I hadn't dared dream of before. I considered returning to forensic accounting full-time, but a different path called to me. The experience had ignited a passion for helping others caught in similar webs of financial deception. I started consulting quietly at first, advising individuals, mostly women, on how to navigate complex financial betrayals within their relationships. It was fulfilling work, turning my painful experience into a source of empowerment for others. I also rediscovered hobbies I had long abandoned: long hikes in the state parks, exploring small towns along the coast, reconnecting with friends who had stood by me. The process of healing was gradual, but each step felt purposeful. Mark largely faded from our lives. He moved away, his career in tatters. The whispers of potential investigations into his deeper financial dealings continued in the background, a distant hum, but they no longer consumed my every thought. My focus was forward on the horizon. My life wasn't perfect, but it was honest. I had faced the darkest deception from the person I trusted most, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and fiercely independent. The frozen dollars were not just money. They were the solidified proof of my resilience, a testament to the quiet power of a woman who refused to be underestimated. I had walked through fire, and I was ready for whatever came next, on my own terms.